everyone can see.
All right. Hi, and welcome to the webinar. I am Bryson, the founder and CEO of SCYTHE, which I guess my headline is covered by the unicorn site there. So how apropos for us. And I'm joined by good longtime friend, Ian Anderson from Oklahoma Gas and Electric.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
So why don't we start with who you are, what mistakes in life led you to being on this webinar with me, and kind of getting in from there to how we can enhance cyber resilience.
Yeah, hi. So Ian Anderson, I'm currently serving as Senior Manager Enterprise Security and Monitoring Operations at Oklahoma Gas and Electric. So OG&E, we are a vertically integrated electric company with generation, transmission, and distribution assets, and we serve 990,000 customers across the state of Oklahoma and parts of Arkansas. So I made the mistake of yammering at someone at the platform used to be called Twitter, and struck up some conversations with Bryson, and have done some things with like the ICS Village, and next thing we know, we're talking about SCYTHE and all the great stuff that we've been able to accomplish using the platform. We've been chasing this concept of adversary emulation since 2018, and we were just doing it wrong over and over and over again. We tried to do our own red team stuff. We tried to buy some products, and we've kind of settled on the SCYTHE platform and have derived a lot of value out of it. So Bryson, thanks for letting me come talk with you today, and I'm excited to kind of speak a little bit about our journey and how we view adversary emulation and the role of adversary emulation within the operations space.
Yeah, why don't we start there? So for those of you who haven't seen the maturity model that we have at SCYTHE, you can find it off the blog. We recommend starting with purple teaming because you're having transparency in planning, execution, and remediation. I really like to emphasize the remediation because I know a lot of folks have had the annual pen test, had the red team, they come in, they wreck you, they throw a poorly written report at you, and then they're like, good luck. And you're like, well, wait, hold on a second. I already had a full-time job. Now you're giving me more work to do, and you're not here to help me through it. So what am I really getting for that? And then adversary emulation is the next step of increasing, going back to the SANS ICS Summit talk that Ian and I did a couple of years ago. There's three variables in an exercise: the scope, the technical complexity, which we're talking about how realistic to drive the threat, and then the frequency of doing this. So Ian, we're now talking technical complexity. How did you get your leadership to buy into adversary emulation as the ops manager? What were you looking for from that, right? Like predate, going back to 2018, Ian has less hair.
It was like crap, like WannaCry and things like that were popping up in the news. And in my role as a manager type, right? Like you have to kind of sell the vision up, right? Because you have to unlock some of the dollars and the resources, and then you also have to like enroll your teams and help the operators see how these things actually help their program, because it can't be just the one way. So our first experience with trying to go down this route, we were using a product that I don't really even know if it exists anymore. I've totally lost track of it. But it was really a kind of a top-down push, right? And so, from a vision perspective, leaders understood the request of, or the idea that we should ensure that our stuff, whatever our tool stack looks like, is able to meet the threats of today. And so, a very a common scenario for a lot of us is, your CEO will read the Wall Street Journal and they'll say, ooh, scary cyber thing. I wonder if we're okay. And then they will ask the CISO, who then asks the director, then who asks the manager of security operations, are we secure? And frankly, we got tired of just being like, we think. right? We wanted to actually provide some data around, what would this look like in our environment? And so we went with some, adversary emulation, and again, like, the platform that we chose was really painful to use, as we were spending more time keeping it operational than we were actually like deriving value out of it. And its whole thing was automated, right? Which is kind of nice from a scaling perspective. But what our operators needed is they needed like the hands-on. They needed to really understand the tactics of the adversary and be able to build out campaigns and have that kind of granularity and move them closer to what they're actually trying to defend against. They were trying to build a collection of security operations and analysts, and not necessarily like infrastructure operators and things like that. So we want people to do the security thing rather than the system administration thing. And that's why, like, the Scythe campaign structure, and then when you start talking about purple teams and why that matters, like, it's bringing all of them closer to what the adversary is actually doing. So, and Bryson, sorry to kind of dominate some of the conversation. One of our guiding principles, and you can go and read it. There's a white paper that was written by a guy, Mike Asante and Rob Lee. Some kind of pretty well-known names, and Mr. Asante, rest in peace. He did more for industrial control system security than anyone else on the planet, and he is missed to this day. But Mike and Rob wrote this paper around the kill chain for industrial control systems, and there's all sorts of there's all sorts of goodies, but in there's this little nugget about effectively building home field advantage. And the idea with home field advantage is the adversary has to operate in an environment that they don't necessarily know, right? The defender, kind of like the spider in the web, gets to understand what that environment looks like. They get to know what things look like. But the problem is like, how do we get our defenders to understand like what a trip in the spider web looks like? Right. That's what adversary emulation does for us. It builds a home field advantage. That's what Purple Team does for us. It brings in some expertise and builds home field advantage. And so now when we see a blip in the sim, or a blip in the tool, we have a pretty good idea of what those mean and can actually tie it to different TTPs that we've seen based upon the threat intelligence that we're ingesting from all of our different partners.
So that gives the technical and the operations perspective of what works. But as I always like to tell everybody, in fact, I just had a call with a large manufacturer earlier today, and I cannot tell you how many of these calls I have where, again, it's the corporate, it's the IT folks, and they're trying to establish the cyber resilience in the OT environment, which of course is foreign to them. And it's not that they don't know any OT, but I mean, the control engineers, the automation engineers, the plant lines were doing just fine before the IT folks came in and tried to do something. And I go time and time again, it starts with leadership buy-in. Why does leadership care about what you're trying to do? And where can you find change projects, which I really like to phrase it, when you're doing an organizational change project. You're not just installing software. You're not just putting in a firewall and segmenting things. Because you are changing the way that business is done, which means people are going to have to do things differently. Their lives have been affected. Operations have been affected. And so I'm emphasizing that point, because how did you get the leadership buy-in? And then the second part, because I got to see this up front, and I know it's the same in a lot of places, is, buying into the concept for your actual technical folks. Why did they agree to do this? I mean, I know that they were like, you know what? Yet another stupid tool. Why do I need another dumb tool? Why would I do this? How is this going to make my life better?
So on the first one, again, like what's the value prop? I mean, is that kind of what we're getting at, or how do we change the culture?
I mean, at the top, because it starts with leadership engagement. There's two kinds of leadership in the world. I care about security. I care about compliance. And when you're pushing that additional investment beyond the, hey, this is what I'm required to be in a regulated industry to match, that takes money away from something else. And then you have the folks who actually have to live it and do it, because you can buy any shiny tool, and if you're not using it and you're not making it yours, you're just throwing money away in another way.
So I mean, on the first one, kind of, it's almost a little bit of social engineering, right? I mean, we kind of looked at like what are some of the initiatives of the business, right? And I think a lot of us are going through that, like these concepts of digital transformation, where the business wants to make more intelligent decisions, right? So leverage the data that they have on hand in order to find efficiencies, or maybe sunset some stuff that's not working, or take advantage of emerging trends and things like that. And so we started to talk about like, well, how do we produce that data that will help us make better decisions, right? Capturing the observability and telemetry of the performance of organizations is a tale as old as time. And it's kind of crazy to me that security operations and just cybersecurity in general isn't very good at like actually telling their value story, right? A lot of us are like, well, are you secure? Well, as we're not actively hacked as far as we know, right? And giving that answer is like, as far as you know, we're secure, is a really bad answer, especially when a company's pivoting to this data-driven decision making, where they say, well, I know everything else in my business and I can put an accurate measure on everything else in my business. But this cybersecurity thing, which honestly is really scary to a lot of executives, the inability to do that and speak their language is really challenging. So with our adversary emulation journey, that was kind of the value prop up top, was we're going to create data-driven decisions on our security operations capabilities. And we're going to drive out tools that suck. We're going to drive out capabilities that are not meeting our needs. And like, it's been effective to date. I mean, we've already kicked out a couple, we've kicked out a couple of tools, or, one was like, it wasn't good enough. The other one was like, it wasn't actually adding value. Like, one was missing stuff, one wasn't really being used. And so it's like, if I'm not using it, why do I have it? Right. A lot of security operations teams almost treat these tools like they're Pokemon. You got to collect them all, right? But then, like, how do you tie that to value? And so this is where the important part is: you are reducing complexity for your security operations personnel, which they love. They are so happy to have less crap to deal with. Now, getting rid of stuff is politically sensitive, because sometimes you're kind of calling someone's baby ugly. Having data that allows you to be able to to have that conversation in a non-personal way is really helpful. But tying that value back and letting your executive leadership see that means you're going to then become a better part of the business. And so here's how I know it's worked here. We are challenged differently today. When I'm asking for resources, we are challenged differently today than we've ever been challenged before. Previously, it was, yeah, just throw money at the problem, because that's what executives do when they don't know how to address a problem. It scares them, right? Now, people can only be scared for so long before they're going to make a change. And so our big victory here is now we've put in place where we communicate up, we attach value of our operations and our capabilities from our security ops all the way on up. We tie it to business initiatives. And now when I go ask for resources, I'm asked questions like, hey, is this a now thing? Is this like, what's our risk level? What's the probability? I start getting asked the same questions that the rest of the business units are getting asked, which means now I'm part of the team. I'm part of the club, right? I'm no longer a scary thing. I'm now part of I'm an intertwined critical component of the business. Look, if they're just throwing money at you, guess what? The first time something bad happens, because you have effectively an unmanaged and scary platform, that's a resume generating event. You're gone, right? And for us, we want to provide that assurance, that resiliency, and that reliability, because that's what our industry is. We're the grid. You need to know that things are going to work. And even when things start to go bad, how do we recover? How do we remain resilient, right? That's an intentional effort. And for us, from a security operations perspective, we can only do that by leveraging adversary emulation to help ensure that we're meeting the threats of today, not the stunt hacking, not the fancy crap. Because a stunt hack comes in, you're going to go buy some niche tool that's not going to get integrated. It's a waste of time, waste of money. Pen tests are great as long as they're properly managed. But for us, it's about continuous improvement. It's about operational improvement. And that's where the Purple Team stuff comes in. And so, Bryson, I mean, if we want to pivot and talk a little bit about Purple Team and the Purple Team experience, I'm all in.
Well, so going back to the other question there is, how did you get your practitioners involved in this? How did you get them convinced that this was a worthwhile investment, not just in terms of money, but I mean,
Yeah.
resource. Because again, a tool isn't an automated tool is always going to be limited. Security is a process, which means it does require some purposeful thought. And so how did you get that part? And then that kind of then I think feeds into where the purple teaming process and the additional exercises come in.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, leveraging the adversary emulation platform. So, one of the things that we do is we don't run these gigantic emulation environments. Each of our operators actually has like just VMware installed on their workstation, and they've got copies of the gold, our images on, for our servers and laptops and things like that. And so they are running their emulation campaigns in a very tight and very isolated, because we're really focusing in on the efficacy of tools. So that has really helped, because what that is teaching them is we are really trying to focus in on getting the most value out of the tools, and they've seen tool reduction efforts because of that. And then they can use these, the
really emphasize that tool reduction part.
Tool reduction, saving money, saving complexity, saving time, saving blood, sweat, and tears, trying to keep these junky systems operational. But then they're taking the output from the emulation campaigns, and they're being able to tie it in to do things in our SIM, to create better correlations, tighter correlations. And so then what we start to see is we're actually reducing the number of events in the SIM that then they have to go respond to, right? So we're quieting the noise, because now we know what bad looks like. And it is a continuous tuning thing. And so, I can't take credit for this. I talk about it in our SANS talk that Bryson put out there. But we have a cyclical process on my operations team where we go from hypothesis, emulation, validation, automation, and we just keep going round and round and round. That's just the operational grind, right? But everything we're trying to do is about how are we removing complexity and noise from the operators and being able to drive maximum value out of our tools and connect that to align with our, organizational efforts, across our IT, OT, and cloud spaces.
And this ties right into a question from the audience. How often should tabletop and purple team exercises occur? So going back to the triad, right? Scope, what's in scope?
Yeah.
Technical complexity, how far, how realistic, how easy is what I'm doing? Because there's a spectrum. Again, convenient and automated gets you simple stuff.
Yeah.
More complicated stuff takes more thought. Again, this is part of where we tried to build our platform to automate some of the things. And that actually has come from a lot of discussion with Ian, which we'll get to. But then there's everybody kind of gets into this mindset of we're already trained on the annual exercise. Yeah. For compliance reasons, I will do an annual pen test. What is that, right? And that can mean a lot of different things. A purple team can meet the annual requirement. And I, again, going back to the maturity model, encourage that to be the starting point. But waiting annually is, of course, going to be a question of what kind of resources can I afford, right? I mean, you can't keep finding things and pushing the exercise, because that's just the quality assurance, the measurement, the rationalization, the tuning that comes on top of what operations is already busy in doing. And so one of the things I think that's really neat with Ian is he's not only going to answer that, but then talk about how we got out of the exercise process and created a micro process where it's really integrated naturally into operations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, how often, we're a regulated utility. We're part of our business is a regulated utility. And so we have certain requirements via, it's called NERC SIP, for those that aren't familiar with the space. But, it says, every so often we have to do these kinds of exercises, incident response exercises, really tabletop exercises. And what, I think previously we were really working towards all right, how are we just satisfying this regulatory requirement? And because we've got so much else going on, right? And I think a lot of us are like that. It's we just comply, we want to do more, but it's hard to do more when you almost feel like you're drowning. And so part of it was a lot of intentionality, not just from myself, but, from our CISO, from our my supervisor security operations to to ensure that we are building in that time to do some of these things. And so we've actually pivoted to doing quarterly purple team exercises, and we really focus in on like one or two hypotheses, right? And we work with SCYTHE to develop those hypotheses and come up with an emulation plan and say, hey, here's what we're going to go test, and here's how we're going to go do it. And then my team has benefited hugely from having that direct interaction with SCYTHE to run these purple teams and say, hey, they're going to help us think like the adversary, because that's not necessarily a skill a lot of defenders have. Right. So they're going to help us think like an adversary. They're going to help us build out these emulations. They're going to say, here's what we're seeing out in the real world. Here's what successful campaigns look like across the organization, across different organizations, different customers. Let's try that. Right. I mean, if you are not taking care of some of the low hanging fruit, right, or the common attack patterns, then the adversary is never going to have to use anything fancy on you. Like our goal is to make them be pretty clever and pretty unique, and the purple team exercises help us kind of get there. One thing we have included now with using SCYTHE, and this is something that SCYTHE is developing that we're really excited about seeing it continued, is this idea of actually now tying in tabletop exercises. When you think about an event or an incident, right, there are two huge components to this. There is the technical response component, which requires, kind of an all hands IT, security operations, like figure out what happened, blah, blah, blah. But then you think about the leadership component and all the other things that have to go on with that. So, notifications and legal concerns, and, the list is very, very long. I think a lot of organizations really focus on the technical controls piece, but you see really messy responses to incidents because organizations are just not prepared from that level. So they'll have to bring in a consultant and spin everything up. What we're trying to do through the tabletop exercises is actually tie these things together and say, okay, this could happen. And while they're doing the purple teaming and making sure that we're doing what we can to not let that happen, if it were to happen, what would our organizational response? And so we can start working out that muscle, and hopefully, and prayers up, like that never happens. But if it does happen, like this isn't necessarily the first time any of us have heard or had some of these conversations. So, so that's how we are trying to tie all of these together. Move from that kind of compliance, get really focused in on just doing a couple of use cases quarterly. Building that muscle over time. And so what, Bryson, I think we're on 2 years of doing this quarterly with you all. And we've gone, like, our complexity and scope has gone from tiny micro, like, can we just solve or, address one problem, one issue? And now we're doing things where, like, I wonder if someone could pivot into our OT environment using blah, 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 and then leveraging SCYTHE to go do some kind of innovative, neat things to go test the security controls on stuff that we've never been able to really go validate before. So
how are your folks using it at the micro level?
Yes. Okay. So, I kind of referenced this on the virtual machine side, and this is really, like, again, I can't take credit for any of this. I'm blessed to have some really smart people that work here. They asked for VM Workstation Pro, and then they asked, hey, can I get a gold image of our server environment? Can I get the company image of our desktop? And they did that, and then they went and modified these images to remove stuff. So they removed our anti-malware tool off, they removed EDR, or they just left one thing on. And so we've got all these different variations of our master image across our server and workstation environments that my team can use to go test specifically how tools will react. And then they can do different combinations. So they can say, hey, I'm going to have this image with anti-malware, but no EDR, but it has our secure configuration. What's that going to look like? Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to root out the weaknesses of the tools themselves. We're really trying to find out where in our tooling stack do we have that weakness, and where do we need to go do an addressing. So by removing everything, we've been able to like really focus in on like our EDR. There's an opportunity for us to improve. And then it gets turned over to kind of engineering, and it's a discussion between engineering and operations of like, okay, is this a material weakness of the tool itself? Is this a configuration change? Is this a byproduct of our secure configuration? Like we can go and find the technical reasoning and then tie all those things back together. The nice thing too is since it's all local, they can run as many of these instances. They can just go, churn, and do different variations of the campaign, right? Because we're hypothesis driven or intel driven. So we can take a piece of intel, take that and say, all right, now here's my hypothesis, and we convert that into a campaign, and now we're off to the races. Where I believe we're going is that part is almost going to get automated in its own way, where we're going to be able to split off and do different variations of different campaigns to take account for the different types of tactics that we see, because an adversary will have like a certain tactic to get on, and then from there they may do 3 or 4 different things because that's just part of their toolkit, and that's a capability they have. Well, we should be able to build that in and actually just run those, and so we can see based upon the different tactics how does our environment respond. And then from that response, it's all about, that's the home field advantage.
So in that, I think you've done something recently that everybody kind of dreams about, which is doing this process to actually being able to remove a tool. And the reason that is everybody dreams of it but never does it is because there really is a CYA psychology to what if that's the one tool that would have stopped something. I can't confidently make that decision on that. And so you're talking about the data evidence driven approach of, hey, let's stop making decisions on feelings. Let's go prove it. And then when we say, hey, we can save $300,000, $500,000, again, that's money that gets to go somewhere else that you want it to, as opposed to the thing that wasn't doing what you thought it was going to do anyway. So why don't you share that success story as much as you can, of course?
Yeah, no, I mean, we're certainly not going to name names, but like everyone has that problem. Like the fear, right? And look, it's a managerial CYA. It's easy to maintain, right? It's difficult to bring in new, because that's new resources, it's new capital. It's really difficult to remove because, as I said earlier, you're effectively calling someone's baby ugly, right? Because at the time it was bought for a purpose. It was put in with love and care by, what, like, we're just going to all assume positive intent, competent and capable professionals. Right now, has this tool been given the TLC and the love and the watering and the care and the hugs and singing songs to it at night in order for it to be the best tool that it can be? I don't know. A lot of tools, I think, kind of get going, and the second they go in, they kind of start to rot a little bit because there's just not enough time to go around. But as Bryson said, like, kicking stuff out is a risky move for leadership. Because again, like, it's easy for me to just kind of like maintain. Here's my budget. Here's what I paid last year. Let's just pay that this year, right? It does take bravery, and you do have to have a reason up. It's like, I'm just not pulling this just because like I don't like XYZ product, or the vendor ticked me off, or the sales guy is a jerk, or whatever. You really do need that data, and as we talked about earlier, companies are really moving to be data oriented and data centric. Cybersecurity, with all the stuff we see, all the telemetry we gather, isn't necessarily there yet, right? In terms of like understanding what we're seeing and the value that it brings. So, we have been running campaigns for years, and we are now really paying attention to trends. What tool is continuously not detecting, not alerting, not blocking? And everything we do is in that order. Can it detect it? Are we even capable of seeing it? Because if we can't, great. Like, let's create an alert. Can we create the alert? Can we create the block? Some tools don't really do blocking. Some tools just do alerting. That's okay. But those tools that routinely just fail to see it, or fail to even register it as a problem, because a lot of tools will log it, but they won't necessarily say, yeah, this is a problem. And it can't be on our security teams to go through and know every single log source and every single log entry and be able to like tie that and say, oh yeah, no, you need to correlate this is bad, right? Like, you have to hold your vendors to a standard. Now, for this, for the couple of vendors that we've done this with, we pass that feedback, and sometimes they're responsive, sometimes they're not. It just kind of depends on your relationship and the tool itself. Like there's all these variables. But at a certain point, you got to look at and say, hey, is the juice worth the squeeze? Now, another thing that we're seeing is that everyone's got a platform anymore, right? And so we're seeing duplicative capabilities across tools as well. So one of the things that allowed us to kick out a tool was we saw in our environment, like, hey, this tool can do it. This tool is actually seeing it. It's detecting it. It's alerting it. It's blocking it. Like it's actually meeting it. It's not the one that we would list out specifically in our control stack as performing this function, against MITRE, but it's hitting. So what if there's an opportunity for us to basically like promote the one that's kicking butt, and then kind of move along the one that's probably not, meeting its obligations. So great example is like, Defender, right? Like what is like pretty much all of us have Defender. Like how are you using Defender? Defender can be your primary tool. It can serve as a backstop. It can serve as a data collection thing. Like there's a lot of opportunities to do things a little bit differently and do things a little bit more intelligently. And I'm sorry, Bryson, you're trying to cut in. I'll end on this one thing, right? So like, one of the reasons we kind of stuck around with some of these tools is like, you also have to consider, how they, performance of them. Right. And I don't necessarily mean on the detection thing. Like one of the things we've really always struggled with Microsoft is that there is a delay between X happening and us knowing about it through Microsoft. I think if you have used the Microsoft products, you're aware of like this weird delay in their endpoint security products and things like that. And so that's one too, we had to like have enough experience, enough data to where now we can make an informed and and data oriented and business driven decision on, hey, can we maybe use Defender for this? Can we use this other product for this? You just got to know what that performance looks like. And that's another thing, that being able to run these purple team campaigns and these adversary emulation campaigns helps you track the efficacy of the tool, and just like the raw performance of the tool.
So follow on from that has been the growth of Purple Team Exercise maturity into a co-parallel relationship with the tabletop exercise. So tabletop exercises are great for engagement. They're great for training. You always have new people coming in and out, making sure everybody understands what in fact would happen in this scenario. So there's more than just the technical piece, but one of the weaknesses to the tabletop exercise is I say, this is what would happen. This is what we would do. And we all go, yes, that's what we would do. And everybody just takes it at face value. But you built up this capability. So why not have the Purple Team exercise be the technical inject to the scenario as it's growing? So you've done one of these with us. What was your experience? What did we do? What are the takeaways?
Yeah, no, it really was fantastic. Is I mean, one, it includes the communication piece for your security operations personnel. So they're working through an incident, and so when you're just doing just the Purple Team or just their tabletop, like you're not necessarily stressing your incident commander on. They are trying to balance like the technical response piece, but also the communication piece. And so for us, I mean, it is a whole organization capability upgrade when you are tying the technical problems with the organizational needs to, to be able to respond effectively as a corporation or whatever your entity is. You are also able to help the leader types see what some of these timeframes look like. I think like you sit down in a tabletop and you say, okay, like fast forward to today, or excuse me, to tomorrow, or this is now 2 weeks from now. Like we're time traveling all over the place. I don't think that a lot of leaders understand, cybersecurity events and incidents happen over days, weeks, months. It's not a like, I'm going to use the phrase cyber war, right? It's like cyber war happens at the speed of light. That's crap. Right. Yeah. I mean, technically the electrons, the packets are going pretty fast. Right. But that is, the impact isn't felt at that speed. Right. Like the campaigns start months and months and months in advance, because like you'll get into a tabletop and you'll say, how long has this been going on? Right now, in a real event, you would hand that over to the operations, to the incident commander, and they would start running that data. That would take them some time to go figure that out. The triaging, the containment, all the different steps of a response. Like you do have to bring some of that reality into the tabletop exercise with your executive leadership and things like that, because that's an important part that they need to understand, is that this thing is not instantaneous. Right. And so the purple team exercise has helped a lot of that, because now you're creating that interaction between the two, and you don't have like set injects where you can easily offer up all that information. Right. You are going to challenge your people differently. Yeah.
Question from the audience. What is your consideration for artificial intelligence in this space? So I just summarizing what I've seen. It's not security driven. If you ever want to hear the greatest Microsoft Copilot rant ever, just go look at Jake Williams, and he will give you the don't be the beta test case for it. And so where a lot of folks in security are having to respond is because the business wants artificial intelligence to enable something that they're doing, and then we have to follow on and guidelines. So how do you view AI in that? Is that something that you would consider in the future scope for these tests? And yep, that's the question.
Yeah, no, and I get it, and I think where AI struggles sometimes is creativity, and like I worry that AI will just kind of give you kind of made the stunt hacking joke, but like a stunt hacking purple team engagement or stunt hacking tabletop exercise, because that's just kind of the kind of crap it's going to generate. I'm not one to say never on anything, because we never know what 10 years from now looks like. But when I look across our industry and I look at our partners and I look at the threat intelligence capabilities that we're ingesting through third party private sector stuff, our ISAC stuff like that, like there's a tremendous amount of content that is coming into us that helps drive some of those, and it's based upon here's the crap that's actually happening, right? Going back to the adversary is not going to get fancy unless they absolutely have to. And so, I mean, God, I think this was 10, 15 years ago, but Nir Zook of Palo Alto Networks, he had this whole thing where he was talking about changing the economics behind an attack. And that's something that really has stuck with me throughout my career, is I want it to be expensive, not just from a, whatever tooling perspective, but from a time perspective. I want it to be expensive to operate my environment. That's kind of what we strive for. You go watch the Watchmen movie, right? And Rorschach is whatever, getting beat up or whatever, and they're like, I'm not stuck in here with you, you're stuck in here with me. And that's what we aspire to. We want to be frustrating and a huge pain in the ass for everyone that's operating inside of our environment, and doing so in ways that are unintended. And unfortunately, that kind of means internal people as well. You follow the rules of the road, things are real fast and smooth, but when you start kind of trying to do weird stuff, it becomes painful. And again, going back, that emulation stuff helps us with that. Can AI serve a piece in that? Again, maybe eventually, but in its current configuration, I think we would use it to just help us clean up reports, things like that. Maybe leverage some models and stuff like that to help us identify elements of an incident. But for me, actually, the big one, and we're working with a partner on this one, Bryson. Sorry to bring up other companies, but he's a mutual friend of ours. Some stuff that Dan Gunter and Insane Cyber is working on, right, in terms of incident response. Effectively having a little LLM on a box where I can just use natural language to query and say, show me all the DNP3 traffic or whatever, right? To be able to actually, instead of having to go, figure out a schema of a database or whatever, it's I just give it a whole bunch of data, then I can go ask questions, and it's kind of portable and things like that. That's where I think AI is going to really impact security operations. But today, I think asking it to do adversary emulation stuff, it's not necessarily going to have a huge positive impact on what you're trying to do. And again, and I'm sorry, just to kind of, again, belabor the point, these are opportunities. We view purple team exercises and tabletop exercises as an opportunity to build relationships with your partners, your vendors, your business units, your teams. Like this is a chance for you to get in front of them and talk to them and connect as human beings. Because like at the end of the day, when everything starts going haywire, people are going to save you. Tools are never going to save you. They will always fail. It's the relationships. And so adversary emulation, SCYTHE, just in general, is a relationship engine for us. We use SCYTHE to create relationships across our organization, and those are lasting. And that really is probably one of our core competencies. That's a business edge that we have, is our relationships internal.
So you talked about that tools will always fail. How do you use this process to assure that that is not happening?
Well, again, it's the layering, right? And so like it's the tool will fail, but like how do we back it up, right? And so like do we have, and I'm not advocating for like you should run 2 anti-malware tools, you should run 2 EDRs just in case one fails, because that's financially stupid. What I'm saying is that across the course of the attack, right, you need to have different detections on across different tools and understand, how one of these attacks or one of these campaigns hits these different tools. And so, if say anti-malware misses, well, EDR saw it, or NDR, network detection response saw it. Something else is there to back it up. If you run a campaign and literally nothing in your stack sees it, now you got a huge problem, and that's where the failures occur. So for us, it's about, if a tool fails, can we fix it? And this is again part of like probably going back to the discussion, like how do you kick stuff out? No tool is going to be 100%, and so we know that. So not one, just because it fails one thing doesn't mean it's a bad product. Maybe it's just like a missing feature, maybe it's a missing configuration, something. But these campaigns that you build based upon intelligence and hypotheses, it should traverse across multiple detection opportunities, and you have to ensure like you're taking advantage of those. Because again, a full miss, brother, you're in trouble.
So what's next? Where do you want all of this to go? Where are you taking the team?
Yeah, getting closer to our crown jewels. So really exploring the OT space. And with SCYTHE as our partners on a lot of that. I think one of the big differentiators for us as a organization that has a lot of industrial control systems, SCADA systems in our environment, SCYTHE, the fact that we can run it on-prem and do some things where we're not necessarily exposing organizational data, is really important. Again, we strive to be where the business is. We have some, that great partnership that will help us get in and say, can we validate some of these controls as we go in? So, we're actually out there right now making sure that we know, are there control upgrades or the new stuff going in? Like, where can we create opportunities, maybe even like a pre-production environment to do some things that's going to ensure that our controls are ready to go. Because what we've learned is if you don't take advantage of those opportunities, then getting security put in after the fact is almost impossible. So let's just say you have a power plant, or you have a manufacturing facility or something that's going through a big upgrade. Like that's an opportunity to get your emulation efforts in prior to like a go live, to go validate those controls. And that's why you need a partner that's nimble, understanding of the space, and with a customizable platform that can actually challenge these environments based upon the current intel. And really what we've strived to do is be able to build trust in these environments, and so then we can go in and do some additional like emulation campaigns as needed. So we see stuff that's directed against specific processes or certain application types or whatever, that we have the trust in the business to be able to go in there and execute at a high level and a safe and reliable level. Some of these campaigns, there's nothing worse than bringing down a plant or bringing down a facility. Trust me, right? So, Bryce and I have talked about beachhead ops versus, action on objectives and stuff like that. And so that's where I would like to see us go over the next year, and then even including the tabletop exercises. as a component of that. So how are we getting the technical piece closer to the core business? And then how are we bringing our executive and a leadership team along with us so they're prepared in case, an event were to occur?
That's a lot.
It is a lot. But look, we are, all of us, and everyone here on this call are charged with, we have a really difficult job. And things are not going to get easier, right? And so what we really need to do is focus on, are we making the best decisions in support of our environment, in support of our businesses? Like, I think a lot of us probably spend a whole lot of time doing stuff that really doesn't move the needle. And so we do need to collectively, I think, as an industry, really start to focus on what actually matters instead of chasing the new widget, the new fancy thing. Like, the adversary is not pivoting to all this crazy new stuff. They're still doing just basic, like, I'm going to steal your password, I'm going to live off the land, I'm going to pivot around, they're going to do the exact same crap they've been doing for a long, long time. And we continue to go chase the fancy blinking box because that's growth, right? So for us, it's more about, how do we take what we've been served, push closer to the core business, bring our relationships along, because we think that will build us a better overall security program.
Yeah, I think I would summarize that as I talk about my classes. I can't give you the 25th hour in the day. And I've never met anyone who says, you know what, we have enough resources, we don't need more. It really comes down to being able to prioritize and having a tool and a process that drives communication, education, and continual improvement. And I think that caps this webinar perfectly. Like, that's the drop mic.
Done. I'm with you. So
thank you for joining us, Ian. I think this was fantastic. I hope everybody is watching to see that too.
Yeah, Bryce. No, and thanks again. Thanks again for letting us come and and share a little bit of our story. We really appreciate it, and all the things that SCYTHE has done and continues to do, and we are ecstatic for what's coming in 2025 from the SCYTHE platform and from the services side. So appreciate the time, and I wish everyone here a very happy holiday, and stay safe out there. Take care of yourself, because this is a marathon, not a sprint. So we'll
thank you, OG&E, for keeping the Christmas lights on.
That's right. Yeah, that's a big job right now. So, all right. Thank y'all.